If someone were to ask Ethan Wade about the value of a human life, he would answer with a number. Not the number of years lived, not the number of loves had, but the digits that come after the decimal point on a profit report. Because in his world, everything had a price tag, including himself. Ethan's penthouse sat in the heart of Seattle, so high that he could watch the clouds drift past his windows every morning. Below, rain-soaked streets shimmered with car lights, like veins pulsing through a cold, metallic city. Everything was nearly perfect. Italian wood floors, silver-coated glass walls, a marble bar counter. But one thing never changed: the silence. A silence so thick it sometimes woke him at night, thinking he had just heard his own heartbeat. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd had a real conversation. His employees talked numbers, his partners talked contracts, and the women he met talked about him, not the man he was, but the image he projected. The successful man in a crisp white shirt, with a controlled smile and eyes as cold as steel. No one ever asked if Ethan was happy. Perhaps they assumed that someone who had everything didn't need happiness. That morning, like every other, Seattle was soaked. The financial news ran on the TV in the living room. Downstairs, his assistant Lucas had prepared the car. "You have a board meeting at 8, Lucas said. "Then a presentation for the community project." Ethan frowned. "What project?" "Future Bridges is a collaboration with some social organizations. Calvin thought you should attend. There'll be press." Ethan nodded, indifferent. Projects like that were just image campaigns. He didn't believe in handing out donations, cutting ribbons, taking pictures, and calling it social change. But he would go, because going was part of the power game. The meeting took place on the top floor of Wade Holdings. The boardroom stretched long as a runway, its glass walls opening to a hazy city skyline. Calvin Reeves, his closest friend, and the company's CFO slid a folder toward him. 5 consulting groups have been shortlisted. I recommend Barrett Group, low risk, easy to manage. Ethan skimmed the list and nodded. "Set up presentations. I'll sit in." Calvin blinked. You? You usually leave these to me." Ethan shrugged. "Maybe I want to see how people sell humanity." He said it half-jokingly, unaware that this would become the turning point of his life. That afternoon, 5 firms came to present. The room was cold, the white light sharp against the projection screen. The first 4 were identical, flashy graphics, colorful charts, hollow promises of sustainable impact. Ethan sat through them, bored. Then the last presenter walked in, Naomi Quinn. No assistant, no slideshow, just a worn folder and a scuffed laptop. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied back, face bare but illuminated by alert, steady eyes. She moved through the sleek room like someone entering a foreign land, but without fear. "Good afternoon. I'm Naomi Quinn from Foundations Collective. Thank you for the opportunity to present." Her voice was low, warm, with a calm rhythm that compelled attention. Instead of opening her laptop, Naomi pulled out a sheet of paper and placed it before Ethan. It was a child's drawing, a wax crayon sketch of a little girl smiling between 2 adults' arms. Beneath it, in shaky letters, were the words, "When I grow up, I just want to be alive." Ethan frowned. "This is Imani's dream," Naomi said. "A little girl from the South Side shelters. I asked what she wanted to be when she grew up. That was her answer. Not a doctor, not an astronaut, just alive. Where she lives, that isn't guaranteed." The room fell silent. Naomi continued, calm and unwavering. "I read your proposal. It's a stage set. If you want to build parks, paste your company logo and cut a ribbon. That's not change. That's conscience cleanup." A few people in the room shifted, uneasy. Ethan leaned back slightly, his cold eyes shifting into something more challenging to name. "You're calling me a hypocrite?" "No," she said softly. "I'm calling you human, and humans can change if they dare to look where they don't want to." The words rippled through the room. Ethan was silent for a moment. He could have dismissed her instantly, yet something made him want to listen. "What are you proposing?" "Stop buying images," Naomi replied. "Start showing up. I want your company to give time and presence, not at budgets. Go there. Meet people. Listen. Money matters, But presence transforms. That's not a business model. No, she said. It's a human one. No one spoke again. Naomi gathered her papers, thanked them, and walked out, calm amid their unsettled stares. Ethan stayed seated, eyes still on the drawing. You're not seriously considering her, Calvin muttered, exasperated. Maybe. She just called you a hypocrite. She was right. That night, the city glowed after the rain. Ethan stood by the window, glass of whiskey in hand. He had never seen Seattle's lights so vivid, as if each one whispered that people still lived, dreamed, hurt beyond these walls. And he didn't. When his phone rang, he answered, voice weary. Lucas, set a private meeting with Naomi Quinn. No representatives. I want to see her. A pause on the other end. Yes, sir. Ethan hung up. Something unfamiliar stirred inside him, warm, yet frightening. The feeling of someone who no longer knows who he is. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon, when the office was quiet and Seattle glowed in damp twilight. Naomi arrived on time, with the same old folder. Ethan opened the door himself, smiling awkwardly. Thank you for coming. You said you wanted to hear more about the proposal. Actually, I wanted to hear more about you. Naomi smiled faintly, unflinching. Is that how you usually start meetings? No. But not many people dare tell me I'm wrong. They sat across from each other. Outside, rain tapped steadily on the thick glass. The city's reflection shimmered in Naomi's eyes like scattered stars. I reread your proposal, Ethan began. It's different but costly and complex. Aren't you afraid of being rejected? I'm afraid of living in a world where people lie just to be accepted. He paused. Why do you care about this work? Naomi spoke slowly, her voice carrying the scent of memory. I grew up in South Seattle. My grandmother, Evelyn Quinn, raised me and my brother. Every night she told us, the world isn't bad, just full of people who've forgotten they were good. I met a woman named Temperance Hall. She taught me to read. She said, showing up is the greatest act of love. I'm just trying to do that. Ethan noticed the small calluses on her hand as she held her coffee. You mentioned you were once in foster care, she asked gently. He nodded. 7 homes, 10 years. I learned to stay silent to survive. In that world, trust was a luxury. Everyone left. Naomi looked at him not with pity, but understanding. That's why you're afraid. Afraid of what? Of love. The air stilled. Ethan gave a quiet, brittle laugh. Do you always speak this bluntly? Only when I see someone tying their own chains. For the first time in years, Ethan spoke about his mother, a woman who worked 3 jobs to keep him fed, then died of exhaustion. She always said, never let them see you weak. So I became the strongest, the richest, and untouchable, but I forgot how to be loved. Naomi said nothing, only looked at him. And in that look, Ethan felt something he hadn't seen in years, truly seen. No handshake or deal had ever done that. If I approve your project, he asked quietly, would you believe I'm doing it for the right reasons? I don't care why, Naomi said. I care what happens. If one child is safer because of you, whatever your motive, that's good enough. Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. You make me feel strange. Maybe you're just seeing yourself the part you forgot. Before she left, he said softly, thank you for being honest. Naomi paused at the door. It's all I have, Mr. Wade. When the door closed, Ethan sat still, listening to the rain drumming against the glass. In the fortress he'd built his whole life, a small crack had formed, and through it, light began to seep in. That night, Ethan didn't drink. He rewrote the Future Bridges plan, crossing out PR sections and adding a new line. Field participation required, CEO included. The next morning, Calvin entered his office, stunned. You're actually going to the field sites yourself? Ethan, I've never done the right thing. Ethan cut in. Now I want to try. Seattle glistened under the rain, as if the city was washing something old away. Ethan stood by the window, hands in his pockets, a faint smile on his lips. He didn't know what journey he was beginning, only that, for the first time in years, he no longer felt empty. If someone asked him today about the value of human life, Ethan Wade wouldn't answer with a number. He would say, by the ability to feel that another person is alive, Some people enter your life without a sound, just a glance that makes you pause. Naomi Quinn was that person for Ethan. From the first day they met, the image of the woman carrying a child's crayon drawing lingered in his mind. It made the numbers that had once defined his life seem strangely hollow. He tried to work, meet deadlines, and return to the rhythm of his old life. But a few words of hers showing up as the greatest act of love kept echoing in his head like a soft knock he couldn't ignore. A week later, Ethan invited Naomi to join the Future Bridges project as a full-time community advisor. She accepted perhaps not because she trusted him, but because she trusted in the people who might be helped. Whatever her reason, from that day on, they began seeing each other almost every day. Naomi would come to his office in the mornings, raincoat damp, coffee steaming in her hands. November in Seattle was wet and grey, yet the room seemed a little brighter each time she stepped in. Ethan found himself waiting for that, the sound of the door and her voice's calm, steady rhythm. Ethan showed up in an expensive suit on their first field visit together. Naomi looked him over and laughed. "You're wearing that to Riverside? Is that a problem?" "Yes. You look like a developer coming to buy land, not someone coming to listen." "I don't own any jeans." "Then we'll buy some." Seeing a famous CEO and a modest black woman shopping at a discount store drew a few curious stares, but Ethan didn't care. He chose the simplest shirt he could find, tried it on, and felt comfortable for the first time, not because of the fabric, but because he was wearing something that wasn't meant to impress anyone. When their car reached Riverside, Ethan felt they had entered another Seattle entirely. No glass towers, no boutique cafes, only damp alleyways, walls streaked with graffiti, and barefoot children running through the rain. Naomi greeted nearly everyone. She knew each child's name, each mother, each older man sitting on a porch. Ethan walked beside her, silent, watching her laugh and embrace people, things he never did. A little girl ran up to them, hair soaked, eyes bright as raindrops. "Naomi, Miss Naomi." Naomi knelt, smiling. "Imani, what are you doing here?" "I was drawing." "Want to see?" Ethan looked at the wet paper, the same wobbly lines as before, this time showing a red-roofed house and two tall figures. "Who's this?" he asked. Imani pointed to the man. "My dad, but he's gone away." Naomi brushed the girl's hair back, her voice soft as wind. "And you still believe he'll come back, right?" The girl nodded, her smile radiant against the grey rain. Ethan froze. For a moment, he saw himself in that child's eyes, someone who once waited for someone who never returned. As they left the neighborhood, heavy rain began to fall. Naomi tilted her umbrella toward him. "You don't have to understand everything, Ethan. Just be there." He looked at her, his gaze caught between rain and light. "I'm not used to being present. I'm used to being in control." Naomi smiled, barely enough to see. Maybe it's time to learn how not to control. That thought stayed with him all night. Ethan stood before the glass wall in his penthouse, watching Seattle glow through the rain. Droplets traced down the pane like emotions he had no name for. He wondered when numbers had stopped being enough. The next morning, he texted Naomi, "I'll be at the center early. Tell me what you need." She replied minutes later, "Don't just say it. Show up." He did, not once, but again and again. He helped organize supplies, paint walls, and listen to stories he once thought had nothing to do with him. Naomi rarely said much. She let him observe, letting silence do the talking. One afternoon, while rearranging bookshelves, Ethan asked, "Do you think someone like me can really change?" Naomi paused, looking at him. "You're not someone like that. You're just someone learning how to live again." Ethan said nothing, but a quiet warmth spread through his chest. He felt at peace for the first time in years, not because of Naomi, but because he finally believed he could be different. Winter passed softly. Seattle still rained, but to Ethan, each drop now meant something else. He got used to leaving work early to stop by the Riverside Center. Sometimes he brought pizza for the kids, who called him Mr. Ethan, the serious man, giggling. Naomi would watch, her eyes tender as a rare patch of sunlight. Once, as they cleaned up, Naomi asked, "Do you ever think about having a family?" Ethan hesitated, caught off guard. "I used to, but I'm not sure I know how to keep someone close." No one really knows. You learn by trying. What about you? Naomi smiled, a little sadly. I used to think marriage was a journey, not a destination. But with this work, I'm not sure anyone would have the patience to walk beside me. Her words left Ethan silent for a long time. He wanted to say I could, but feared it would break their fragile peace. By year's end, the center held its first Christmas celebration in years. Naomi organized everything: decorations, gifts, every detail. Ethan stood beside her, clumsily hanging lights, making the children laugh. You're the best CEO and the worst decorator I've ever met, Naomi teased. Thanks for the compliment, he replied, voice low, eyes never leaving her face. When the lights came on, the room glowed gold. The children cheered, laughter ringing like bells. Standing beside her, Naomi whispered, "See? The brightest light always comes from within." He turned to her, the glow reflected in his eyes. "No. Sometimes it comes from the person standing next to you." She didn't reply, only looked at him, eyes quiet and deep as rain on water. In that moment, Ethan realized he loved her slowly, warmly, with a fear that felt almost sacred. After the celebration, as Naomi prepared to leave, he stepped forward. "Naomi, would you have dinner with me?" She blinked, surprised. "Dinner? With the busy CEO of Wade Holdings? Just a man who wants to have dinner with you." Naomi smiled, the kind of smile that tightened something inside his chest. All right. They went to a small cafe by Lake Union, no wine, no candles, just hot soup and garlic bread. Yet Ethan felt warmer than he ever had at any grand dinner. Naomi spoke about her grandmother, Evelyn, who had raised her on stories of kindness. She used to say, "If you love someone, don't ask what they can give you, ask what you can give them." Ethan looked at her and murmured, "Your grandmother sounds wiser than the whole world." Naomi smiled. Maybe because she lost so much, she knew what was real. When they stepped outside, rain was falling again. They walked down the glowing streets. Ethan stopped and handed her his coat. She hesitated. "You don't have to." "It's not courtesy," he said softly. "It's because I want to." She looked at him, eyes flickering. Then they walked on in silence, their breaths mingling with the sound of rain over Seattle. A few days later, Ethan arrived at the center with a small bouquet, not roses, but wild daisies. Naomi smiled. "You're learning to speak through actions. You're a good teacher," he said. Their bond deepened, as natural as breathing. No grand confessions, just long silences and quiet understanding. One afternoon, while they were taping an old poster to the wall, Ethan said softly, "Naomi, I don't know how to love right, but I want to learn. With you." She turned, her eyes glistening yet bright. "You don't have to be perfect, Ethan. Just real." He smiled, and in the rain of Seattle, they held hands for the first time. No fireworks, only the sound of rain, but it was enough to begin something true and lasting. Months later, they were married in Evelyn's backyard. Just a few friends, the kids from the center, and the whisper of wind through the trees. Ethan felt his heart slow when Naomi stepped out in her simple white dress. Standing beside her, he whispered, "I used to live in the tallest building in Seattle, but today, I finally feel at home." She smiled, eyes shimmering. "And I trust you, Ethan, even though it's terrifying." They exchanged vows beneath the Seattle sunset. No one knew that cracks would remain behind the bright glass of happiness, as in every human life. But for now, they didn't need to know. They only needed to love and to believe that the light would stay. Early spring in Seattle. The rain still fell with the steady rhythm of the city's breath. Nearly a year into their marriage, Ethan and Naomi lived in a small house near Lake Union, not far from downtown, yet quiet enough to hear the wind slipping through the windows each morning. They had nothing extravagant, just an old wooden table, a few potted plants, and a wedding photo on the shelf. But every time Naomi walked past, Ethan felt an unfamiliar peace. He was still the CEO of Wade Holdings, still consumed by meetings and deadlines, but now he knew someone would be waiting when he opened the door at night. And somehow, that was enough to make everything else smaller. Naomi, though, had always needed little. All she ever wanted was Ethan's honesty, his willingness to listen. Yet sometimes, in his eyes, she still caught a trace of something distant, a shadowed place she could never reach. She would tell him, "Ethan, you don't always have to be strong. I'm here." He would only smile and kiss her forehead. "I'm fine, just busy." And so came the silence. Silence, it seems harmless, but sometimes it's what kills the most beautiful things. One afternoon, Ethan was at the office when Calvin Reeves, his friend and CFO, entered, face tense. "There's a problem. The Northgate investment files got leaked. The media's all over it." Ethan frowned. "Who had access?" "Just you, me, and Naomi." The air thickened. Ethan said nothing. He didn't want to believe it. Yet an old, familiar fear stirred, the fear of betrayal, being left, and being used. The same fear haunted his childhood, from everyone who had said, "We'll come back," but never did. Calvin placed a folder on the desk. Here, system logs. The IP traces back to Naomi's computer. The files were sent to a reporter's email 24 hours before the leak. Ethan read, heart pounding. The logic was clear, too clear. He didn't know that clarity itself was the trap. That night, Naomi came home to find him sitting by the window in the dark room. His silhouette blended with the rain. She smiled, took off her coat, and approached. "Have you eaten?" He didn't turn. "You sent something to the press, didn't you?" Naomi froze. "Sent what?" "The Northgate files. The data came from your system." She stared at him, disbelief in her eyes. "You think I'd do that?" Ethan turned toward her, his gaze heavy, the same one that once silenced entire boardrooms. "I don't know, but the evidence is there." Naomi let out a shaky laugh. "Evidence? You once told me people mattered more than numbers." "No one is above the law, Naomi. Not even me, not even you." The room went still, only the rain tapped against the glass. Naomi's voice trembled. "You never trusted me, not even once." Ethan clenched his fists. "I can't take that risk. This company is my life." Naomi nodded slowly. "And I'm just a small part of that life, right?" She turned away, wiping her tears. "You're afraid I'll betray you, but the truth is, you've already betrayed yourself." Ethan stepped toward her, but she had already grabbed her coat and opened the door. "I'll be at the center tonight. Don't wait up." The door closed. Rain slipped through the small crack she left behind. Ethan stood there, the emptiness inside him vast and cold. He didn't sleep that night. A text came from Calvin. "I'll handle the media. Don't let her near the system again." Ethan replied with a single word, "Okay." The next morning, Naomi didn't return. She didn't answer her phone. When Ethan went to the Riverside Center, he learned she had taken a leave of absence. Her grandmother, Evelyn, only said softly, "She needs time." Ethan went home, staring at the space that suddenly felt too large. Everything was still there except her. On the table lay a single sheet of paper, a list of children from the charity program. In the corner, Naomi had written in pencil, "Don't let fear make you forget why you started." Ethan held the paper and sat down. For the first time in years, he was afraid of himself. 3 weeks passed. Naomi didn't return. The media noise continued. The company's stock dipped. But Ethan no longer cared. He worked like a machine, no smile, no voice. Occasionally, Calvin would ask, "Heard from her?" Ethan would shake his head. He wasn't sure if Calvin asked out of concern or to confirm she was truly gone. One afternoon, as Ethan reviewed the company's new security logs, a young IT staffer knocked on his door, nervous. "Mr. Wade, sir. I think the IP was spoofed. I found a hidden code on an old server. Someone planted it on Miss Quinn's computer." Ethan froze. "What did you say?" "It looks like someone created a fake trace. Whoever did it had top-level access." The world tilted. Ethan stormed into Calvin's office, slamming the folder onto his desk. "Explain this." Calvin looked up, unruffled. "What's this about?" "You did this?" Calvin gave a thin smile. "Ethan, I've been here 15 years. You think I'd be stupid enough to leave fingerprints? Why? She did nothing to you. No one's perfect, my friend. She made you weak. And this company doesn't need a weak CEO." Ethan stared at him, stepping back. In Calvin's eyes, he saw what he had missed for years: jealousy, coldness, contempt. He said nothing more, just turned and walked out. Outside, Seattle's rain poured like a confession. Standing in the street, the water mixed with his tears until he could no longer tell the difference. At home, he opened Naomi's closet. Everything was still there, neatly folded, smelling faintly of soap. On the shelf sat a photograph, Naomi smiling, coffee in hand, his arm around her. Beneath the frame, she had written, "If one day we can no longer speak, remember silence is also a language." Ethan sank to the floor. The frame slipped, the glass shattered. As he lifted it, a small ultrasound photo fell out. The faint label read, "Week 9, the world stopped." The rain outside turned into a distant hum. Ethan's breath broke, his whole body trembling. Naomi had been pregnant, and he had driven her away. That night, he began searching. He called Evelyn, Naomi's brother Malcolm, and everyone from the center. No one knew where she was. Some said California, others Portland, all uncertain. He hired a private investigator. For months, reports arrived with no address, trace, or message. Naomi had vanished as if she had never existed. One late night, Ethan went to Evelyn's house. She opened the door and looked at him briefly before saying, "Son, sometimes people don't disappear. They choose to live somewhere you can't hurt them anymore." He bowed his head, tears falling onto the porch. "I've killed the love of my life." Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, Ethan, you just never learned how to keep it, and you'll have to learn that lesson for the rest of your life." When he left, he turned to see the small house glowing with warm light where Naomi had once laughed and lived. Rain kept falling, as if the sky itself mourned with him. Back in the penthouse, Ethan stood before the great glass wall, the city below blurred. In the reflection, he saw a man who had everything and had lost the only thing that mattered. That night, he wrote in his journal, "I once thought silence was strength, but silence is only how love dies quietly, without anyone hearing it cry for help." Then he closed the book, turned off the light, and let the darkness swallow the room. Outside, Seattle kept raining, and within that rain, it almost sounded like someone whispering not in blame, but in farewell, soft as a breath. 3 months after the data leak, Wade Holdings was back in order. The press moved on, the stock price recovered, and new contracts poured in. The communications team called it a victory. Only Ethan knew it was an emptiness polished to shine. He still went to the office daily, to employees, and signed contracts like a machine. But when he returned to his high-rise penthouse, he didn't turn on the lights at night. The cold glow of the city reflected on the glass, showing him a face older, pale, and lonely to the point of unfamiliarity. One late night, as Ethan reviewed the company's security records, a message flashed on his screen. "Unusual system access detected. Legacy account. Calvin Reeves." He opened the file, heartbeat quickening. It was the same code used to fake Naomi's IP address. In that instant, everything inside him broke. Ethan called Calvin to the office immediately. The room was drenched in a cold amber light, rain whispering against the glass. Calvin entered, calm as ever, as if nothing had happened. "You did it, didn't you?" Ethan's voice was hoarse. Calvin smirked. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb. I found the code in your system." Calvin gave a faint laugh. "And do you have any proof it was me?" "Ethan, sometimes I wonder how could you let a woman make you lose your mind like this?" Ethan's hands tightened. "She didn't deserve what you did." "And what about this company? Were you going to throw it all away for a woman who made you weak?" "I did what you couldn't, protected Wade Holdings from you." "Protected it by betraying me?" Calvin shrugged. "Protected it from sinking. Your love was the anchor." Ethan stared at the man who had once been his closest friend, his partner through every victory, now a stranger across a widening void. He said nothing, just picked up the phone and pressed a number. "Security, 42nd floor. Escort Mr. Reeves out of the building. Now." Calvin chuckled. "You won't, Dara. You need me." "No," Ethan said quietly. "I need to face what I've done." When the guards entered, Calvin resisted, but it was useless. As the door closed behind them, Ethan sank into his chair, hands covering his face. The room spun because he saw the truth. Naomi hadn't betrayed him. The real betrayal came from the man he had trusted most. He wondered if only he had trusted her a little longer, would everything have been different? The next day, Ethan drove straight to Evelyn's house in Rainier Valley. The small home still glowed with warm light, the scent of apple pie drifting from the kitchen. But when she opened the door and saw him, her smile faded. "You're too late, Ethan. Do you know where Naomi is?" His voice trembled. Evelyn shook her head, her eyes tired. "She's gone. Took everything with her." "Gone where?" "No one knows. She left a letter, one for me, and one for you." She handed him a thin envelope. Ethan's hands shook as he opened it. Naomi's handwriting was soft, even like her breath. "Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I didn't leave because of hate, but because I could no longer love you without losing myself. I'm taking our child with me not to punish you, but to protect what's left of the good in us. If someday you learn to live with your heart, we'll meet again. But when that day comes, don't come out of guilt. Come because you've truly changed. Naomi." Ethan folded the letter, his hands trembling so hard he had to grip the table. "Our child," he whispered, as if confessing to his shadow. Evelyn rested a hand on his shoulder, her voice gentle. "She needs peace, and you need time. Sometimes, loss is the only way we find ourselves again." Ethan lowered his head, tears hitting the worn wooden floor. "I don't deserve her." "No one deserves forgiveness, Ethan," she said softly. "We just try to become worthy of it." When he left the house, rain began to fall again. Ethan drove aimlessly through Seattle's slick streets past the neighborhoods he and Naomi had once visited, past the Riverside Center, now marked by a single wooden sign, "Closed for renovation." He stopped the car and stepped into the mud, cold rain biting his skin. Tilting his head to the gray sky, he felt the entire city weep. That night, for the first time, Ethan didn't return to his penthouse. Instead, he stayed at the center, sitting among broken boards and children's faded drawings. On the wall hung Imani's picture, "When I grow up, I just want to be alive." Ethan touched the words and whispered, "So do I." Summer came. Seattle's sunlight was rare, but in Ethan's heart, it was still raining. He lived like a shadow. The company ran as usual, but he withdrew from most projects, declined interviews, and avoided the public eye. The vast penthouse now echoed only with the sound of wind and the television left on for company. He hired investigators to search for Naomi, but every lead went nowhere. No hospital records, no bank trail, no address. It was as if she had erased herself from the world. Each night, he sat by the window, reading her letter repeatedly. One line he knew by heart: "If someday you learn to live with your heart, maybe we'll meet again." But the more he read it, the more it hurt, because he wasn't sure he still had a heart to learn with. One morning, his assistant Lucas brought him a small package. It came from Portland, no sender name. Inside was Naomi's wedding ring. Ethan held it tightly and let out a faint laugh, not bitter, but hollow, the kind that comes with acceptance. He realized then that it was truly over. The woman who had taught him how to live had walked out of his life as quietly as she'd entered it. Months passed. News broke that Calvin Reeves was under investigation. Former employees testified that he had falsified data to secure contracts. The media praised Ethan for cleansing the company, but he felt no victory because the truth had come too late. One evening, driving past Green Lake, Ethan stopped. The water was still, the moonlight pale. He remembered the first time he and Naomi had come here, when she'd pointed to the sky and said, "See? Light doesn't just come from the Sunday, it comes from everything brave enough to burn, even for a moment." Ethan sat on a bench, eyes closed, listening to the water ripple. He saw her face, smile, and voice in his mind how she used to say his name, half teasing and half tender. And within those memories, he heard his own heartbeat, slow, painful, but real. It was still there. He opened his eyes and exhaled. For the first time, Ethan didn't chase the past. He just sat, letting the ache wash through him like rain across glass, cold, but cleansing. From that day on, he began to change. He returned to the Riverside Center, funding its restoration with his own money, not to make amends, but to preserve what Naomi had believed in. He worked alongside volunteers, painting walls, stacking books, and teaching math to orphaned kids. People whispered that Wade, the famously stoic CEO, had gone mad, but Ethan didn't care. His heart felt lighter each time he heard the children's laughter, each time he touched something real, not profit, not power. While cleaning out an old storeroom, he found a faded photograph of Naomi with the kids one day. Beneath it, she had written, "If someone is brave enough to love truly, even if they disappear, the love remains." Ethan sat down, whispering, "Naomi, if you can hear me, I'm learning. Late, but I'm learning." He didn't know that somewhere far from Seattle, perhaps in a small, sunlit house, Naomi was holding two newborn twins, telling them stories about a man who once taught her that some things must be lost before we understand their worth. Outside, it began to rain again in Seattle. But this time, within the rain, there was something else. Hope. 2 years passed. Seattle still rained, but for Ethan Wade, time was no longer measured in days. It was measured by the nights he woke in the dark, reaching for the space beside him, realizing Naomi was still gone. He was no longer the powerful CEO of Wade Holdings. After stepping down and handing control to the board, Ethan chose a quiet life in a small house by Green Lake. Days were spent working at the Riverside Center. Nights were for reading, tea, and silence. No whiskey, no contracts, no gala lights. Only rain, wind, and memories he'd finally learned to live with. Every morning, he walked around the lake. It was his way of keeping his mind steady. He greeted the coffee vendor, fed crumbs to the ducks, then sat on the same old bench beneath the maple tree Naomi used to love. Some mornings, he could almost see her walking past, hair damp with rain, that tilted smile lighting up the gray air. But when he looked again, there was only wind. Then one April morning, under a rare, clear sky, Ethan heard laughter bright, childlike, carrying across the grass. The sound was so pure it stopped his heart. He turned. Under the trees, a woman sat on a picnic blanket, her hair tied back, a linen dress brushing her knees. 2 little girls no more than 2 years old ran around her, clutching balloons and giggling. The scene was so serene it looked painted. Ethan almost looked away until the light caught her face. His heart stopped. Naomi. Her hair was longer now, her face thinner, but there was no mistaking her. No one else could make the world around her feel that warm. He stood frozen. She was here, with 2 children. He looked closer. One girl had soft brown curls and bright starry eyes. The other had straight hair and a dimple when she smiled. Both carried something uncannily familiar, a trace in their laughter, their gaze, reflections of him. A strangled sound rose from his throat. Ethan took one step, then stopped. His heart pounded painfully fast. Naomi was tying one girl's shoelaces. When she lifted her head, her eyes met his. In that instant, everything stilled. No one spoke. The world held its breath. Then Naomi looked away, quick and sharp. She began gathering their things, her hands trembling. "Amara, Zora, come here." Ethan heard the names clearly, her voice still gentle, only thinner, unsteady. The girls ran to her. "Mummy, what's wrong?" "We're going home. It's going to rain soon." Ethan took a breath and called out, his voice rough, "Naomi." She stopped, but didn't turn. Her shoulders stiffened. "It's you?" he whispered. Naomi inhaled slowly, then turned to face him. In her eyes, there was no anger, no love, just quiet exhaustion and wariness. "Ethan." She said his name softly, confirming it wasn't a dream. They stood only a few yards apart, but stretched 2 long years between them. Ethan wanted to say everything. "I'm sorry. I searched for you. I thought of you every night." But no words came. Naomi's voice was calm, measured. "You shouldn't be here. I didn't know. I didn't know where you were." Ethan." She cut him off gently. "Please, not here. Not in front of the children." Ethan glanced down at the girls, staring up, curious, at the 2 adults who suddenly seemed to stop the world. One of them asked, her voice bright, "Mommy, who's that man?" Naomi swallowed, forcing a soft smile. "Just someone Mommy used to know." The words hit like a blade wrapped in silk. Ethan lowered his head, saying nothing, while the first raindrops began to fall. Naomi took her daughters by the hand and walked away. He watched until they disappeared into the wet street. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain streamed down his face, mixed with something saltier. 2 years, and now she was here with their children, and all he could do was watch. That evening, Ethan didn't go home. He sat on the park bench as rain poured, soaking him through. Passers-by glanced at him with pity, but he didn't care. He just sat there, staring at the lake where Naomi had once laughed beside him. Memories flooded back, dancing in Evelyn's yard, burnt pancakes, her laughter echoing through their living room, and when she'd walked away in tears, every memory played in slow motion, cutting deeper than before. He wondered, is she happy? Do the girls know about me? Then he smiled bitterly. Of course not. The man who sent their mother away had no right to be remembered. That night, he couldn't sleep. Rain struck the window like the heartbeat of the city. He opened his laptop and searched for Naomi Quinn. No results. No photos. No trace. She had erased herself from the world yet now. He knew she was here, somewhere in this city, living without him. The next day, he returned to the park. And the day after that, every morning, he walked the same path, hoping for a glimpse. A week later, it happened. Naomi sat with the girls on a bench, reading aloud. Ethan stood at a distance, afraid to intrude, watching them hurt, but it was a sweet kind of hurt. One of the girls, the curly-haired one, Amara, pointed at a duck. "Mommy, that duck looks funny." Naomi laughed and pulled her close. At that moment, Ethan thought he had never seen her more beautiful. Not the beauty of passion, but the quiet grace of peace after the storm. He lifted his phone, meaning to take a photo, then stopped. He had no right to keep that image. She had chosen this life, not with him, but with happiness. He turned to leave, but as he did, Naomi looked up. Their eyes met again. She didn't startle, just held his gaze for a long moment, then said something to her daughters and walked toward him. "Are you following us?" she asked quietly. "No," he said. "I just walk here. Green Lake has plenty of paths. Why always this one?" Ethan hesitated, then admitted, "I didn't want to disturb your life. I just needed to know you're okay." Naomi sighed. Her eyes softened, though the distance between them remained. "Ethan, I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not ready to forgive, either. I want peace for my girls. You understand?" He nodded. "I do. I only wanted to see them just once." Naomi looked toward her daughters, smiling faintly. "You already have. They carry you in every smile. You don't need to see more." The words hollowed him. He nodded, unable to speak. "Are you happy?" he asked finally. Naomi looked out over the lake. "I'm at peace. Happiness. Maybe I'm learning how to recognize it again." She turned to go, but he called softly, "Naomi, I'm sorry. For everything. For not believing you. For leaving you alone." She paused, back still turned. "I know. But please stop saying sorry. Just live in a way our children could be proud of, if they ever learn the truth." Then she walked away, hand in hand with her daughters. Ethan watched, his smile trembling through tears. He knew he no longer belonged in her world, but at least he had seen what mattered most. Naomi was alive, smiling, and their children were proof that love, even when it dies, still leaves life behind. That night, Ethan wrote in his journal, "I found them. Not to reclaim, but to know that love was once real. And sometimes, knowing that is enough." Outside, the rain began again, but for the first time, Ethan didn't feel cold. After that morning at Green Lake, Ethan returned home in silence. He sat for a long time on the couch, staring at the old wedding photo of him and Naomi. 2 years ago, they had believed that love alone would be enough. Now he knew love, by itself, never was. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He wrote her a letter not to ask for forgiveness, but to say all the things he hadn't dared when she was still by his side. "Naomi, I'm not writing to ask you to forgive me. In these past 2 years, I've tried to live by what you once believed. I'm not the same man, not the one who measured worth in numbers. I started from zero." At the Riverside Center, The kids call me Mr. Ethan, the man who paints slow but smiles fast. I'm no longer afraid of the rain. Every time it falls, I think of Seattle. I think of you. Don't turn away if you see me on the street one day. I won't come close. I want you to know I'm still here living decently, as you once hoped I would. He sent the letter to a mailbox in Kent, an address he guessed might be hers. He wasn't sure it would reach her, but he sent it anyway, as a quiet ritual of someone learning to let go. Days passed. No reply. The following week, Ethan visited the center as usual. The children were painting. A little boy ran up and hugged his leg, giggling. "Mr. Ethan, did you bring cookies again?" "Of course," he smiled, "but remember we share them equally." Naomi had once taught him that. Sometimes, giving is something you have to learn. And now, he practiced it every day. That afternoon, he returned to Green Lake. Naomi wasn't there. Neither were the girls. Only the trees, the still water, and a sleepy duck perched on a rock. He sat down, opened his notebook, and wrote, "I didn't see them today. Maybe this is life's way of teaching me patience." 3 weeks later, Naomi appeared again. She didn't look afraid this time, only guarded. Ethan didn't approach, just stood at a distance and nodded. She nodded back before walking on with her daughters. For the first time, they exchanged a look without turning away. One morning, while Ethan was buying coffee near the lake, he heard familiar laughter behind him. Naomi was leading the two girls into a bakery. She saw him, hesitated. Then he smiled and held the door open for her. "You still walk here?" she asked softly. "It's a habit. It's going to rain. I know." They stood beneath the awning, the rain tapping softly above them. Neither spoke. Yet the silence between them felt gentler than before, no longer filled with anger, but with the fragile calm of two people who had once loved deeply and were now learning to breathe beside each other, even from afar. Naomi bought pastries, turned to her daughters, and said, "Amara, Zora, thank you." Both chimed in, voices bright and sweet. "Thank you, Mr." Ethan crouched slightly, smiling. "You're welcome." A small, fleeting moment, but it caught in his chest. He had heard his children's voices for the first time, even if they didn't know who he was. As Naomi led them away, she looked back and said quietly, "Thank you for not trying too hard." Ethan nodded. "I'm still learning how not to." After that, he began writing her a letter every month. No pleading, no questions, just stories. About a new project for the children, a charity event, or the lavender plant he'd managed to grow on his balcony. He didn't know if Naomi read them, but he kept writing. Sometimes, speaking silently is the only way to keep a heart alive. By June, Seattle had its rare stretch of sunlight. Ethan arrived at the center earlier than usual. The children played soccer in the yard, with laughter ringing. Watching them, he thought of Amara and Zora. They must be about this age now. Lucas, his former assistant, stopped by and handed him an envelope. "I found Miss Quinn's address. Want me to reach out?" Ethan looked at the envelope for a long time before shaking his head. "No. If she wants, she'll find me." Lucas said nothing. He knew his old boss truly had changed. That evening, Ethan walked around the lake. Something caught his eye on the bench where he'd once seen Naomi a children's book, damp from rain. On the first page, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Amara and Zora Quinn." He picked it up, tracing the names with his fingers. Two small names, yet they cut straight to his heart. He sat down, holding the book close. Maybe Naomi had forgotten it. Or maybe she'd left it on purpose. That night, Ethan wrote another letter. "Naomi, today I found the girls' book by the lake. I don't know if you meant to leave it, but thank you for letting me touch something that still belongs to you. I'll keep it safe, the way I wish I'd once kept you. I don't know what the future holds. Every day, I wake up trying to live a life that, if you ever heard about it, you wouldn't feel ashamed for having loved me once." He placed the letter inside the book and mailed it to her old address. A week later, a small envelope arrived. No name, no return address. Inside was a short note. "I got it. The girls like hearing you're a good man. Thank you for not stopping." Just a few lines, yet they brought Ethan to tears. Not because he'd been forgiven, but because she had read them and because, in some quiet way, Naomi was still watching, just as he had once watched over her. The months that followed passed gently. Ethan continued working at the center, teaching life skills to orphans and raising funds for a new playground. The media began to talk about him again. Ethan Wade, the man who left an empire to save his soul, but he didn't care about the headlines. He only cared about living right. One afternoon, while teaching a drawing class, a little girl asked, "Mr. Ethan, do you have children?" He smiled. "Maybe I do, but I haven't met them yet." "Do you love them?" she asked. Ethan nodded softly. "More than anything." The girl grinned. "Then I bet they know." Her innocent answer made him pause. Maybe she was right. Naomi and the girls could feel his love in ways words could never convey. That evening, he added one more line to his journal. "Forgiveness doesn't arrive in a day. It's a long road. But if I keep walking, maybe one day they'll see." Seattle was still raining outside, but no longer the rain of loss. Ethan smiled for the first time in years as he watched the drops slide down the glass. He understood now. Every small effort, every quiet act, was its own way of saying, "I'm still here, and I've changed." That autumn, Seattle began to change its colors. Along the road to the riverside center, rows of maple trees burned bright red like fire. Ethan stood there watching the leaves drift slowly down, and it struck him 3 years had passed since the day Naomi left. 3 years spent living between two worlds. One, the old world of power, where he had once ruled, and the other, a small world where he was learning to be a decent man. That morning, he had his first appointment with Dr. Iris Thorne, a therapist Temperance Hall Naomi's former teacher had recommended. She'd told him, "You can't just keep fixing your mistakes through action. Sometimes a person has to sit down and learn how to bear pain without running from it." The therapy office was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building. No leather chairs, no smell of expensive perfume, only mint tea and the steady clock ticking. Dr. Iris, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, invited him to sit on a worn brown chair. "Where would you like to start?" she asked. Ethan gave a weak smile. "I don't know. I know I've lost everything." "And you think therapy will bring it back?" "No. I think it might help me stop hating myself." The honesty made her smile softly. "Then we'll start there." Ethan began to talk about his childhood in the foster system, the cold nights, the shared meals, and the fear each time a door opened, never knowing who would walk in. About his mother, who worked 3 jobs to raise him, then died from exhaustion. About how he'd learned that love always ended in loss. And then, about Naomi, how she'd stepped into his life like the first light after a long darkness, and how he'd extinguished that light himself out of fear it would leave him. Dr. Iris listened without judgment. When he stopped, she asked gently, "Do you know why you destroy the things that are beautiful?" Ethan was silent. "Because you were taught that everything beautiful eventually leaves. And rather than be left behind, you learn to leave first." He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had once signed million-dollar deals, now trembling. "So what do I do now?" "Learn to stay," she said, "even when it hurts. Learn to let yourself be loved without needing control." The session lasted nearly 2 hours. When he stepped outside, the sky had turned to rain. He didn't seek shelter. He let it fall across his face, the chill cutting through his skin, a reminder that he was still alive. That night, he called Temperance Hall. "Thank you," he said. She chuckled. "For what?" "For believing I could still change." "You don't need to thank me, Ethan. Just remember, forgiveness isn't about being absolved. It's when you can look at your old self and say, 'I won't be that man again.'" For the first time, Ethan understood. No one could save him, not Naomi, not anyone. He had to face himself and do the saving alone. Winter came, and Seattle turned cold as memory. The Riverside Center was busier than ever now. The kids had given Ethan a new nickname, Mr. E. They didn't know he'd once been a billionaire. They only knew him as the man who always showed up, listened, and never broke a promise. One day, a boy named Jalen, 15, once caught stealing, asked, "Mr. E, why do you help us? You don't owe us anything." Ethan smiled. "Because once I was just like you, and because someone once believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." The boy frowned thoughtfully. "Where's that person now?" In a place I can't reach anymore, Ethan said quietly. But I still try to live so that if she ever hears my name, she'll smile, not hurt. Jalen didn't fully understand, but he nodded. Then she must be proud. Ethan laughed softly, and for a moment, the warmth returned to his chest. At the end of the year, he received a Christmas card from Temperance. Simple, with only 4 handwritten words inside. Keep showing up, Ethan. He pinned the card to the wall beside an old photograph of the Riverside Center, back when it had been nothing but rubble. That Christmas Eve, he stayed late at the center. The children had all gone home. Only the sound of the wind moved through the halls. He turned on the lights, walked the corridor, and ran his hand along the wall where Naomi had once painted a small heart during their first campaign together. He whispered, "You see this, Naomi? It's alive again. Just like you said, everything deserves another chance to live. Even me." When he stepped outside, the first snow of the season was falling. He looked up and smiled. In the distance, Seattle shimmered beneath the snow, no longer a city of contracts, power, or loss, but a place where a man had finally learned how to be human, not just successful. That night, Ethan wrote in his journal, "I once thought I needed Naomi to save me, but the truth is, she already did, by leaving." He closed the notebook and blew out the candle. In the dark, only a faint glow remained from the window where snow kept falling, softly, like a quiet forgiveness. Naomi Quinn had never thought she'd see Ethan Wade's name in print again. She was sitting in her small kitchen that morning, sunlight filtering through the misted window, when Evelyn, her grandmother, set a magazine on the table. "You should see this," she said. Naomi looked up. "Another business headline? No. It's about him." On the cover was a photograph of Ethan, standing among children at the Riverside Center. Sunlight fell across his face, no longer the sharp, untouchable CEO she once knew, but a man in rolled-up sleeves, smiling honestly amid children who smiled back. The headline read, "Ethan Wade, from tycoon to the man who rebuilt Seattle's soul." Naomi said nothing. It had been 3 years since she'd last heard anyone say his name, except for the times her daughters asked, "Mommy, why don't we have a daddy like other kids?" And each time, Naomi only replied, "Because we already have so many people to love, sweetheart." But whenever those words left her lips, they left a quiet ache. She touched the image on the page. Ethan looked thinner and more sun-worn, but there was something different in his eyes now, not sorrow, not regret, but peace. Evelyn poured tea, sitting beside her. "Do you see him now? That's the man I once prayed would learn how to love." Naomi gave a small, shaky laugh. "And what do you think I should do?" "Nothing," Evelyn said. "Just stop hating." Naomi fell silent. She remembered those first months after leaving Seattle, living out of a rented room in Portland, pregnant, exhausted, afraid. She remembered the night she gave birth to Amara and Zora, gripping her own hand through the pain, whispering, "I'm here, my loves. We'll be okay." She had been strong ever since, but never truly at rest. After the girls were asleep that evening, Naomi pulled the magazine from the counter and reread the article. It detailed Ethan's transformation, selling his penthouse, repainting walls, teaching orphans math, and mentoring homeless teens. Each sentence cut into her not with pain, but like a blade carving away the anger that had hardened around her heart for years. She whispered, "You really did it." The next night, Naomi called Temperance Hall, the woman she had long considered her second mother. The voice on the other end was steady, familiar. "Naomi, I knew you'd call." Naomi smiled faintly. "You always know everything." "No," Temperance replied. "I only know that eventually you'd reach the moment you could let go." Silence stretched between them before Temperance spoke again. "You can forgive without going back. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's when you can look at the past without trembling hands." Naomi looked down. Her fingers were still shaking. "I'm not there yet." "Then start by looking," Temperance said. "Not at him, at the part of you that still loves." The words undid her. Tears came, not from regret, but from realizing something she'd avoided for years. She had never stopped loving Ethan. She'd only hidden that love in the quietest corner of her heart, the place where, in sleepless nights, she could still hear his voice. "I'm not perfect, but I'll learn." Naomi was invited to the Bridges of Tomorrow charity gala a week later, honoring the Riverside Foundation. At the bottom, in small print, she saw the co-chair's name, Ethan Wade. Her heart stopped. She read that name again and again. From the doorway, Evelyn said softly, "Maybe it's time you saw him again." Naomi shook her head. "I don't know if I can stand in front of him without crying." "Then cry," Evelyn said. "Just don't run." It took Naomi several sleepless nights to decide. Finally, on Friday morning, she pulled out a simple black dress, tied her hair back, and told herself she wouldn't meet a man she would witness whether he had truly learned to love. That evening, drizzle misted over Seattle. Inside the gala hall, light glimmered off glass and silver. People laughed. Champagne clinked. Naomi stood among them, her heart beating unevenly. She scanned the room and saw him. Ethan, standing at the far end, wearing a plain grey suit. Not the commanding CEO of years past, just a quiet man with gentle eyes. He didn't search for her, didn't perform. He smiled as someone spoke about Riverside. The host took the stage. "Tonight, we honor two people who turned the dreams of hundreds of children into reality, Naomi Quinn and Ethan Wade." Applause rippled through the hall. Naomi stepped forward, her pulse racing. Ethan stood on the opposite side of the stage. They looked at each other through the glare of 100 lights, seeing, in a single glance, all that had been: pain, loss, and a love that had never completely died. Naomi spoke first. Her voice trembled, but was clear. "When we lose faith, nothing can be rebuilt, not a city or heart. But if someone truly wants to change, they can turn their mistakes into lessons. And healing begins when we're brave enough to face the past without fear." The room erupted in applause. Ethan bowed his head slightly. Naomi saw his eyes glisten, but his smile was calm, steady. Later, she stepped out onto the balcony. The rain had turned soft, almost like mist. She needed the air. Behind her, quiet footsteps. "Do you notice," said a familiar voice, "how the Seattle rain never really changes?" Naomi didn't turn. It doesn't. Only people do. Ethan stood a few paces away. "Thank you for coming. I didn't come for you." "I know," he said. "But thank you anyway." They stood together in silence. Rain pattered gently on the railing. "You really have changed," she said softly. Ethan smiled faintly. "No, I've been trying to live how you once believed I could. You don't have to do it for me." "I know," he said. "Now I do it for myself." Naomi turned toward him. She met his eyes for the first time in years without fear of what the past might bring. "The girls are well," she said quietly. "They know of you even if I haven't told them the full story." Ethan's smile trembled, tears bright in his eyes. "Thank you for that." Naomi brushed her fingers along the railing, her voice whispering in the rain. "Maybe one day, I'll tell them everything, but not tonight. Tonight should be for peace." Ethan nodded. "Peace is all I've been waiting for." They stood side by side as the drizzle fell, saying nothing more. Only the sound of rain and the soft shimmer of Seattle's lights reflected in their eyes a quiet glow, honest and tender, no longer confused between love and pain. Naomi exhaled, a small smile forming. "I see it now. You really are different." Ethan met her gaze. "And you're still making me want to be better," she smiled gently. "Then that's enough, Ethan." And that was how their story, once fierce, now tempered, found its quiet truth. Two people standing side by side, no longer afraid of silence. Because silence is sometimes the highest form of forgiveness. That night in Seattle wasn't just rain, but an actual storm. Wind howled between the skyscrapers, sweeping up leaves, sirens, and the city's restless hum. But inside the glass-lit hall hosting the Bridges of Tomorrow gala, laughter, music, and wine sparkled as if the chaos outside belonged to another world. Ethan stood at the back of the ballroom, quietly watching. The golden light washed over his face, softening the once hard edges time had reshaped. People looked at him with admiration. The man who had been ambition incarnate was now a symbol of compassion. But Ethan knew he wasn't there to be praised. He was there because of Naomi. She was in the crowd, radiant under the chandeliers. Her navy dress flowed as she moved, her hair loose, her face bright, no longer the weary, wounded woman from years ago. Now she was peace itself, someone who had rebuilt a life from what was once broken. Ethan watched her from afar, afraid to step closer. He had waited 3 years for this moment, but now that she was near, fear found him again. Fear that a single wrong word could undo everything. Fear of wounding her once more. When the host invited Naomi to speak, the room filled with applause. She walked to the stage, poised, graceful, with a clear and steady voice, the quiet truth that silences everything around it. Thank you to those who believed in what once seemed impossible. I used to think some cracks in the heart never heal, but maybe they aren't meant to destroy us. Perhaps they exist so the light can come through. Silence, then a wave of applause. Ethan joined in, slowly, eyes never leaving her. When she finished, the host called him to award her recognition. He walked forward, 3 years apart, and 1 second of eye contact. No anger, no fear, just 2 people who had survived their former selves. He handed her the certificate, voice soft as breath. Congratulations, Naomi. She accepted it, smiling faintly. Thank you. 2 simple words, but to Ethan, they felt like a baptism. When the event ended, he didn't leave. Instead, he stepped out to the balcony. Outside, the storm was in full force, rain slamming against glass, wind cold and sharp. He leaned on the railing, watching the city blur beneath the downpour. Still don't know how to come in from the rain, do you? The voice made him turn. Naomi stood in the doorway, a champagne flute in hand, light shimmering in her eyes. He gave a quiet laugh. Maybe I still like the rain even when it ruins everything. She walked closer, stopping a few steps away. Rain isn't always sad, Ethan. Sometimes it just reminds us that everything can begin again. Wind swept across them. Rain clung to Naomi's hair, her cheeks glistening. Ethan lifted his hand, then let it fall. He was still afraid. You wanted to say something, didn't you? She asked softly. He nodded. I used to think that if I ever saw you again, I'd have 1,000 apologies ready. But now, there's only one thing I need to say. He met her gaze, voice trembling but clear. Thank you for leaving. Because if you hadn't, I never would have learned how to stay. Naomi stood still. Rain streaked her face. It was impossible to tell if she was crying. You really have changed, Ethan. No, he said. I'm finally living the way you once saw I could. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's why I could never hate you. They fell silent. The rain became their background music, steady, soft, forgiving. Ethan looked up at the grey sky. I don't want you to come back. I need to know. Have you forgiven me? Naomi held his gaze for a long moment before answering. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means I no longer wish to erase you from my memories. Ethan nodded, eyes wet. That's enough. The storm grew heavier. Most guests had gone, leaving only dim light and the sound of rain. Naomi set her glass on the railing, resting her elbows beside it. Seattle's night glimmered on the wet glass like a sea of stars. Do you remember the first time I talked about rain? She asked. I said Seattle is a city that knows how to cry without needing comfort. Ethan smiled. And I said rain only comes when people are weak. Do you still believe that? No, he said softly. Now I think rain is when the city washes itself clean. Naomi laughed, a quiet, genuine sound. You learn fast. Good teacher. I never taught you anything. You did by leaving. They stood together again, not as lovers, but as 2 people who had once hurt each other and were now learning how to coexist in the same silence without bitterness. And perhaps that was the most valid form of love. Naomi turned to him. The girls know you exist. I never hid that. Ethan nodded, voice thick. Thank you for that. They're still young. I don't know when I'll tell them everything. But I want them to know that, whatever happened, their father tried to become a good man. Ethan looked down, smiling through tears. That's all I've ever wanted. Lightning flashed in the distance. Rain hammered harder. Naomi pulled her jacket tighter. You should go inside. You'll catch a cold. He shook his head. I want to stay a bit longer. I want to remember this moment when the only thing left between us is the truth. She nodded gently. Her eyes softened. Do you know why I came to the gala? For Riverside? No. I wanted to see if you'd changed or were pretending to be good. And now I know. He tilted his head. Know what? I saw you. Not the CEO, not my past, just Ethan Wade, the man who finally learned to be human. He didn't speak. Just looked at her, eyes bright and sincere. "Thank you for seeing me," he whispered. Naomi smiled. "I always did. You couldn't see yourself yet." The storm began to quiet. Rain softened to mist. The wind was still cold, but no longer cruel. Naomi adjusted her coat and turned toward the door. "Stay warm, Ethan. I should go, the girls are waiting." He nodded. "Tell them I said hello." "I'll tell them you helped build the place we once believed in." "And you?" "I'll tell them I was the one who reminded you that belief alone isn't enough. You have to live for what you believe." She stepped back into the light of the ballroom. Ethan didn't call after her. He didn't reach out. For the first time, he understood what it meant to love without needing to hold on. When she disappeared behind the door, he turned back to the city and leaned against the railing. The storm had passed. The night sky opened, just a little, pale light breaking through. He smiled. "We didn't win, and we didn't lose. We just grew up." Outside, the rain had stopped. All that remained was the steady sound of a man's heartbeat once broken, now whole again, slow, real, and finally, at peace. A week had passed since the gala. Seattle was still raining, not the sharp, cutting rain of old, but the soft kind, like mist, gentle enough to breathe in. Ethan still lived in his small house by Green Lake. He made a cup of black coffee each morning and stood by the window, watching the faint steam rise off the water. When he opened the mailbox that morning, he found an envelope among the newspapers. No sender's name, just two neatly written words, "For Ethan." Inside was a photograph. Naomi stood between two little girls, Amara and Zora, all three laughing under a sky of clouds, sunlight spilling gently across their hair. On the back of the photo was a simple note. "Amara and Zora want their father to know that we love hearing Mommy's stories about you. Thank you for living like a good man." Ethan sat on the porch, staring at the picture for a long time. He touched each small face, tears falling silently, but his lips curved into a smile this time. There was no pain anymore, only gratitude because, in the end, they had all found their own ways to reach peace. That evening, he brought the photograph outside and set it on the small wooden table under the warm porch light. Then he wrote his final letter. "Naomi, I received the photo. Thank you for this, and for allowing me to become the man you once believed I could be. I don't know if we'll ever meet again, but if we do, I'll greet you no apologies, no speeches, because everything that needed to be said had already been said. What's left is the truth that we once loved, once hurt each other, and once learned how to be better because of it. You once said, 'To be present is the greatest act of love.' Now I understand being present doesn't mean standing beside someone, holding them in your heart without letting resentment hide the light." He folded the letter but didn't send it. Instead, he slipped it into his journal, between pages wrinkled with old tears. Then he sat still, listening to rain tapping against the roof. Somewhere, Naomi was hearing the same rain. And somehow, both of them understood sometimes. No promises and no perfect endings are needed. Only truth and peace. The following spring, the Riverside Center reopened after years of renewal. Naomi and Evelyn were invited to attend. No one told her Ethan would be there. That morning, the sky was clear, rare sunlight spilling over the courtyard filled with children's laughter and bright flags. Naomi walked hand in hand with Amara and Zora down the freshly painted hallway, where words the children had written covered the white walls. "Home is the place where you are loved for no reason." She read it and smiled. Then she heard laughter echo from the courtyard. Ethan. He was helping set up the gift tables, sleeves rolled up, shirt smudged with paint, his face lit by a smile unguarded and real. Amara pointed, exclaiming, "Mommy, it's Mr. E. He helped us paint last time." Naomi froze slightly. "You know him?" "Yeah. He told us stories about the ducks." Naomi looked from her daughters to Ethan. He had met them without ever saying a word. He had been there, quietly, precisely how she once hoped he would be. When Ethan looked up and saw her, he smiled. A simple smile, not asking, not expecting. Just a greeting between two people who had walked a long road to arrive here. Naomi walked toward him. "You didn't tell me you'd met the girls. I thought maybe you wouldn't want me to. They really like you." "I know. And I like them more than anything." She nodded. Thank you for staying, Ethan. Thank you for letting me. They stood there, surrounded by children's laughter and birds calling in spring. No loose ends, no unspoken words. Just the present complete, imperfect, and enough. A soft breeze stirred, scattering a few cherry blossoms across the ground. Naomi looked up at the sky, squinting into the light. "Do you hear that?" she asked quietly. "Hear what?" "Peace," she said. "That's what peace sounds like." Ethan smiled, nodding. "Yeah, I hear it." They turned toward the courtyard where Amara and Zora chased each other, laughter echoing bright and alive. And in that instant, time seemed to stop. No past, no future. Just a present gentle enough for two once-broken souls to rest. Naomi glanced at him and said softly, "If the girls ask, I'll tell them everything that their father once did wrong, but learned how to make it right. And that forgiveness isn't given because someone deserves it, but because we all deserve peace." Ethan's eyes blurred. "You always have a way of making things make sense." "No, Ethan," she said with a smile. "We just learned how to grow from what hurt us." They both laughed quiet, easy, like wind through leaves. Later that afternoon, as the event wound down, Naomi stood at the center's doorway. Ethan walked up to her. "I won't say goodbye," he said. "Why not?" "Because goodbye means waiting to meet again, and I want to keep this moment as it is whole, without waiting." Naomi nodded gently. Then, "Goodbye, peace." "Goodbye, peace," he echoed. She turned and walked away, holding her daughter's hands. He watched her go, not sad, not longing, just warm inside. That day, Seattle's sky stayed clear. The sunlight glinted off the center's windows, reflecting the silhouette of a man who had once lost everything, now left only with truth and peace. Ethan placed the photo of Naomi and the girls on his desk at the center. On the back, he wrote a single line, "Not a love story, a story of growing up." And the narrator's voice, quiet and steady, lingered like a breath. "Some loves don't need to return to find closure. It's enough when, one day, you can look at each other and smile without pain." Outside, Seattle was raining again. But this time, it was a rain of peace.